Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Down to Business. Quite excited about our guest today. Well-known personality in the Newcastle area, but probably a few things people don't know. He's a former underground coal miner, which was news to me. Not a bad cricketer himself, to be honest, but from recent times, a long-time ABC broadcaster, multi-sport commentator. Motivational speaker, and that's something we're going to talk a lot about, particularly on his much loved topic of mental health, and we'll get to that. But I'd say also a pretty bloody damn proud Novocastrian. So I'd like to welcome Craig Hamilton to join me today. Welcome, Craig.
Thank you, Andrew. Nice to be here.
Yeah, and how you been going with, well, all of us the last couple of years have been a bit turned on their head. How have you been?
Very well, actually. I've learned a lot in the last 20 years about how to manage my health and how to manage situations which are out of my control, which I've got a view that you just can't spend too much time on those things because it's pointless. The attitude in the last 2 years has been control what I can control and focus on that. And that's what I've done. And really, it's been disruptive. Yes, it's been disruptive for everybody. But I think generally I've managed very well and coped very well. The health's been good through the whole period.
And I imagine you would have been, inundated, I guess, or pretty busy when most people, for probably the wrong reasons of suffering or that sort of stuff in the last couple of years, just being out and about and helping, I guess.
Yeah, I think more so just in a casual situation, when you could go and grab a coffee or, you'd be out somewhere and someone would come up and just generally say, I'm struggling a bit, because a lot of people know my story and they feel more comfortable telling me how they're going. And so that's happened a lot. But through that 2-year period, when we were in lockdown a lot of the time, I wouldn't be able to speak in front of a crowd. I wouldn't be able to present in front of a crowd because we weren't doing any of those things. So I was doing increasingly a lot of webinars and podcasts to offset that. So yeah, the answer to the question is it's been hectic in that response. But I'm looking forward to getting back to doing the live events.
Yeah, it gives you a bit of energy.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does, absolutely.
Yeah. I'll come back to where I wanted to go, but just on that point, you mentioned when you're out and about. I guess through these videos and podcasts, we look for a few little tips there for primarily business owners, but what you've got to talk about affects so much more than business owners. But you find, as you said, people know your story, hence they probably feel comfortable coming up. But that is a hard thing for most people to do, isn't it? When it comes down to feeling a bit down, or whether it be a bit more extreme in depression or whatever it may be. What is something in your experience where or why people don't step out of their comfort zone and seek to have that chat? I mean, we said you come from a mining background way back when. Like that would have been a fair stigma, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. When I was mining, I've been out of coal mining now since 1997, and I was working underground from the time I wasn't even 18, and I was working underground right up to when I was 37, when I left the industry with very blue-collar, macho culture, and to talk about anything like this through that period would have been unheard of. And it was. I didn't have one conversation with anyone through that period, nor did anybody have a conversation. Now, bear in mind, through that entire period, my health was generally very good. I didn't have any, per se, mental health issues or anxiety or depression. I certainly, with the benefit of hindsight, look back and I certainly burnt out a few times, which was sort of classic Craig, go at 1,000,000 miles an hour, hit a wall, and then need 3 weeks to basically recover. And that was, I suppose, a sign of things to come. But yeah, unheard of in that culture. And increasingly today, the stigma is still there. Well, not increasingly today. It's less today than it was 20 years ago. Now, I've been speaking now about 15 years, 16 years, and it was still very stigmatised at that time. And it's been that way for hundreds of years. People generally don't talk about this stuff. It's very much, if you've got an anxiety, you've got a depression, you've got a bipolar disorder, traditionally it's been kept within the family. And people have suffered as a result of that, and their whole lives have really suffered through that period. And whether that's home life, relationships, work life, a lot of work life stuff, working within a workplace and trying to be productive has been very difficult for people because it impinges on your capacity to do your job. And a lot of the time, many people have just pretended there's no problem and try to get on with the job, and no one in the office, no one in the business might have a clue that there is an issue. And thankfully, today, more employers are very proactive, is the word, proactive rather than reactive. And they're far more aware of their employees' mental health.
No, that's great. And we'll come back to that. But for those that don't know, not just your story on the mental health journey, but even let's go back further. So you're from Singleton? Yep. So talk a bit about, the upbringing and then how you ended up making that transition not only into the mines but then out of the mines.
It's an interesting ride, actually.
Sure,
because I grew up on a coal mine. I grew up on a dairy farm.
Yeah, right.
Dairy farm. Dad was a dairy farmer in Singleton, and so the first 17 years of my life was on a farm, and probably from 10 onwards, doing a bit with cows. I'm milking cows irregularly, from the age of 12 onwards. And so that was the life. And look, it had the pros and cons. It was interesting growing up on a farm because all the kids who lived in town wanted the farm life, and all the kids who were on farms wanted to be in town. Yep. And I was probably no different there. But you don't appreciate the real benefits you've got of that farm life until you're maybe not there. So... But one thing, Andrew, that I did find out by the time I was 15 or 16, that I didn't want to go into farming post-school because there were no breaks. I'd seen Dad work 7 days a week all his life. The cows have always got to be milked.
Yep.
Always got to be milked. So there were no weekends, there were no holidays, there were no breaks unless you could pay someone to come in and do that. And then you're up for a whole lot,
it takes your profit away.
It does. That's right. So I applied for a job straight out of high school. Got a job in the mines as a trainee cadet miner underground, west side of Lake Macquarie. Cliff Marsh, the late great Cliffy Marsh, gave me a job, and then I started in the BHP mines at the time, and we moved around the mines just to get a bit of experience in the different conditions, and then I was back to my home mine, if you like, western side of Lake Macquarie, and underground then for the next 16 years. And then from there, got a taste of broadcasting probably about 5 years before I left the mines. Yep. You mentioned the cricket, and I was playing for Newcastle one day in a representative match down in Canberra. We were playing at Manuka Oval, wonderful ground
I know it.
In Canberra, and we were playing against the ACT. Local radio station were broadcasting the game. One of their guys came down and said to our team, we were batting, we need a co-commentator. We need someone to, tell us about your team, bit of colour, whatever. Will someone want to do it? And I batted well down, and even though people tell you I couldn't get out of my seat quick enough to race down there, I didn't. But a few of the boys said, you never stop impersonating the cricket commentators, you got the job. So down I went, straight away I could do it, I loved it, and from that point on it was, I've got to find a way to do this for a living. And so for the next 5 years I chipped away to a point where it was time. I was doing a lot more in broadcasting. I was broadcasting rugby league by that stage and still working in the mines. And I was doing my Saturday program on the ABC, still working in the mines. Something had to give. And so
Saw the light, so they say.
yeah, I didn't have a full-time job to go to. I left and backed myself, and the rest is history.
And that's, I mean, it's funny when we have these discussions, and it's a business podcast per se, but even someone like yourself that not necessarily from the business background, work with a lot of businesses, but even in that aspect, what business owners can learn is that there is risk, and you've got to back yourself, and you've probably done it in a way that you've maintained that other role while you're moving into another profession. Yeah. But too many people wait for that to be perfect before they do anything, and unfortunately, that's not life.
That's right.
Yeah.
If you wait for the perfect scenario and the perfect conditions to make that sort of decision, you'll be waiting all your life. It doesn't happen. At some stage, you do have to back yourself. And I think when you do, and you find your passion, and you find something that you really want to do, you can't lose. You cannot lose. You will make a success of it. Because you love doing it, you will learn the skills. And it won't be a chore to learn them. It will be something that you're working towards. And that's my experience.
Yeah, great advice. Great advice. So that sounds, obviously we're summarising here, but that sounds pretty good. Life was pretty good. You moved on from there, and you were doing, you did a lot of commentary in the rugby league space, and even from not just domestically, but internationally. What happened? I know, and many people, as you said, know your story, but life sounds pretty good at that point.
Yeah. What happened when I became unwell?
Yeah, well, how you, because I think a lot of people now, especially the younger generation, see you out and about and hear you talk and maybe read your books, etc., probably don't understand where you've come from. Yeah. So I'm saying with that sort of transition, to the layman, it probably doesn't sound like life's too bad.
No, life was great. And this is the whole conundrum around mental illness. It's irrelevant how 99% of the time external circumstances are. Mental illness doesn't discriminate, and it doesn't matter how successful you are, it doesn't matter how rich you are, it doesn't matter how smart you are. Anyone can be vulnerable. So my situation, I've learned an enormous amount in the last 20 years, but at the time I knew nothing, and no one around me was in any way informed about what had happened. Now, I suppose the first thing to say is that underlying my life was an undiagnosed bipolar disorder. Now, bipolar disorder manifests itself in big highs, manic highs, and depressive lows, and far more so than the average or the norm, if you like. Everyone's mood fluctuates. It's just the degree of fluctuation. Not everybody. We don't flatline as human beings. The problem is the greater the fluctuation in those moods, they become more problematic. So heading into 2000, life's perfect. Well, life's as perfect as can be. I've got no external problems, happy family, no money worries. I've got the job that I love. I've just been appointed full-time with the ABC into a job which saw me broadcasting on a Saturday. I had my own program, and then I was working in Sydney on the rugby league, and I was covering rugby league for the ABC. It was a dream come true for someone who loves sport. It was busy, definitely. It was a steep learning curve, definitely. But I was soaking it up. As I was saying to you before, if you love something and you're passionate about something, you are engrossed with the whole thing, and you will learn and gain the skill set. So yes, it was busy, and a lot of things suffered as far as my lifestyle. They went out the window. I had a very poor work-life balance. I had my diet wasn't great. I'd stopped exercising because there wasn't any exercise time. My sleep was not great. I was still too relaxed. I was still drinking. Not every day. I was never an everyday. I'd have a drink maybe every fortnight. It would be a big
decent drink. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it'd be a classic binge sort of drink. So moving forward to the Sydney Olympics in September of 2000, I was selected to go and be part of that as a part of the ABC commentary team, which you talk about a dream come true here, the biggest show on the planet, and you've been selected to be part of the broadcast team to go to Sydney and work on the games. And for a kid who's milking cows at 12 in Singleton, that's a pretty big leap.
Well, it's monumental, isn't it?
Monumental. It's huge. And you've come out of a coal mine as well. So I'm over the moon about that. But underlying this, and a few months before the Olympics, I'd experienced this terrible depression. I'd gone into a terrible depression, and it was awful. It was, you would not wish this on your worst enemy. I started to slide into this deep funk, if you like, and nothing would shift it. Nothing would shift it.
And sorry to stop you part way there, but I think it's important for people listening. We hear the word depression. We hear even funk. What, if you don't mind sharing, what were some of the things that you experienced? Like, what is that?
Right. There are pretty clear symptoms of a deep, serious clinical depression. At the worst, through that period, I couldn't. I was barely eating because I'd lost all my, appetite.
Yep.
I'd lost confidence. Concentration skills were completely out of the window. I'd go to work, and I was still working through this, and I couldn't concentrate at all. The most basic tasks. It was like I was looking at a blank screen every day, writer's block, if you like. The stress levels were huge. I would just have stress, acute stress every day, even if the external situation wasn't inherently stressful. I just felt that. I had anxiety, acute anxiety. I'd have burning sensations at night across the back of my shoulders. I had negative thoughts. So negative thoughts at that time, it didn't matter what was happening.
You'd make it negative.
I couldn't look at it any other way.
Yeah.
I couldn't look at it any other way. Even though rationally I'd go, there's nothing here to be negative about. That didn't change the mindset. I couldn't just flick a switch and go, Craig, that's not rational to think about this situation. And I had no idea what this was at the time, but I now know this was a mild to moderate depression already. Once you get to, negative thoughts plus all those other symptoms, I didn't want to go out, I didn't want to see people, socially withdrawn, friends, family, pushed away. No one at work knew. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell anyone in my family because of that embarrassment factor, the stigma.
Judgment.
And all of those things. And then it got worse and we went into despairing thoughts. Now, I hadn't even been to the doctor at this stage, which again is very much a male thing. It's very much a macho thing. It's very much someone who's very proud, who's very, has got an ego, thinks I can deal with this. It was then from negative thoughts to despairing thoughts. Now, the despairing thoughts were, I'm not going to get better. I'm not going to recover from this. This is how it's going to be, and it's not going to be much fun. And then 3 weeks later, I'm suicidal.
Just like a self-fulfilling prophecy type thing.
Well, there was no intervention. I should have been at the doctor's back in March, and now we're talking about August. And there's been no treatment, there's been no discussion, there's been no sharing of the situation. I'm still rowing this solo boat, which, with the benefit of hindsight, this should have been, I still can't believe I was so sick and nothing had been done. And I look back at that now, and given even some of those symptoms, at the doctor back in March. And if that situation played out again, I would be, because I know I've got some tools now. Finally got to the doctor and was prescribed medication. Took the medication. It took 5 weeks to work. It was antidepressant medication. So here I am, 37 years of age, living the dream life and taking medication because I'm suicidal. And I'm trying to work out why. And there's no answers. There's no answers. And then the episode at Broadmeadow happened 3 days before the Olympics. I'm ready to go, got the bags packed. My health's back by this stage, of course, because I'm not depressed anymore. The antidepressants have worked. But I'm manic. So my mood's come back from depression and gone through the normal phase and into a manic phase. So I feel fantastic, feel better than normal. I've got a mind that can multitask. I barely need to sleep. I'm probably enjoying life again, probably on the drink again a bit. So, and looking forward to the Olympics. I'm so excited. I'm so excited about the Olympics that it probably goes over the top. And then at the train station, I have a psychotic episode, which is when you're not rational anymore. And you've lost touch with reality. And that's serious when that happens. And that happened on a train station. It's the worst place you could have a
dangerous, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Anything could have happened that day. And I was just very, very fortunate that then things happened quickly, things escalated quickly, and my behaviour became erratic on a train station, which happens when people are experiencing psychosis. And the police were called. And that's the best thing that ever happened. And I was put in the back of a paddy wagon, and instead of getting on a train off to the Olympics, I was off to James Fletcher Hospital in what used to be the James Fletcher Hospital in Watt Street, and diagnosed very quickly with bipolar 1 disorder and hospitalised for 12 days, which is where I watched the Olympic Games. And
sliding doors,
and then discharged and basically given some medication, which was a sort of treatment in the days. It's a lot better now. There's more follow-up, but it's basically, here's your medication. You're bipolar, you need to take mood stabilisers, not antidepressants. They took me right off the antidepressants because that was sort of the mania that we now know. And then after discharge, it was the road back. It was putting Humpty Dumpty back together. And that's what I spent the next couple of years doing.
And I think that, to me, don't get me wrong, I think you've, as you said, fortunate is probably understating things, that the amount of, stages where things could have been very different and you've got through is nothing short of amazing. But to me, it's then what's happened post then and how you can now sit here and share that story, but helping others. So how'd you take that from, which I would say not a lot of people would, but how'd you take that from where you were to actually, as you said, educating and now motivating and openly, I would say helping people? Yeah.
It took a couple of years because I had to get my head around the whole thing that had happened. So did my family. So did my workplace. They were wonderful. The ABC were wonderful because the whole once the psychotic episode happened, I came out of hospital. I didn't go straight back to work. I had to go through a whole process with Commonwealth psychiatrists to get me approval to go back to work, to make sure I was healthy enough to go back to work. That took 3 months. So it was 3 months before I actually got back into the workplace. And I got support from day one right the way through. So the ABC had no idea what they were dealing with here. Is this guy going to be able to work? Is he going to be able to do his job? And they stuck solid, absolutely stuck solid, and they were critical, that workplace support in me getting back into that role. So that was incredibly helpful. I'm blessed that that was able to happen. It took 2 years really before I felt comfortable talking about what happened.
Yeah, sure.
And it was around about that time that I'd done an interview for the Newcastle Herald, and it was the first time that I'd spoken publicly. And Jane Southwood, who used to work for the Newcastle Herald and then the Sun Herald, was a book publisher at Random House by that stage in Sydney, and she's still got family here, and I know her family. And she rang me one day and she said, look, I think we need to do a book about this whole experience. She said, I read the article and I know bits of the story. And I said, absolutely not. we're not doing a book about this. It was way too raw. I had young kids who were in school. I thought, I'm not going to share the whole gritty, raw experience here because I'm not ready to, and I didn't think I'd ever be ready to. And I said, look, you want to do this, ring me in a year and we'll see what happens. And almost to the day she rang me back and said, are you ready to do that book? And I said, I'm ready to do that book because what I'd realised in that year was that my story wasn't unique. It happens all the time. It affects so many individuals. It has the capacity to ruin lives. It has the capacity to turn family lives upside down. It has the capacity to see people lose their jobs and become unemployable in many circumstances. And I felt I was really cranky about it because there was no intellectual property at the time. There were no stories to share. And so I thought, well, I'm either part of the solution here or I'm part of the problem. And I thought, no, I'm going to be part of the solution. And part of the solution was to tell the story. And so the first book was published, Broken Open, in 2004. And from that, then there were requests to speak from all over the place, from corporates all the way down to community forums and workplaces.
Because I think that is the point. It's not, I think Blind Freddie could say we're not dealing with something new here. It's been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years. We'll have humans have been around, I guess. It's just more now that it's more, as you said, improved in how open it is, and we talk about it more. But from a business owner's point of view, we take a big stance on this to go, well, it doesn't matter about, yes, your clients or your customers are important and your products or whatever it may be, but if your people aren't right, the rest of it's not going to work either. So, I guess to me, and you're given that, evidence by how many people wanted you to talk, is that this is something that needs to be, we've seen it's improved, but it needs to be spoken about so much more and so much more assistance put in place because as much as you said, there is IP, there might be templates, or even, there's a lot of good services out there. It's still fairly immature in regards to, compared to, say, industrial relations or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. In the early times, you're spot on. In the early times when I started to speak, and there were requests, I think that one of the first ones I did was one of the big pharmacological companies who were looking for an insight from a consumer, and I was a consumer. I was on medication, so they wanted for their salespeople to say, well, what do we actually, what's the next stage? We have all these medicines, all these medication, and here's someone who can tell us how it actually impacts, from a personal story. So that was one of the first ones. And I remember going out to one of the mine sites, one of the Rio Tinto mine sites, and it might have been in Parkes, somewhere up there, gold mine. And they'd had an incident at the workplace, a mental health issue in the workplace. And for the first maybe 5 years, a lot of the requests were reactive requests. We've got a problem or we've had an issue in the workplace, now we'll get someone in. And since, I suppose, from that point on, there were more proactive responses where it's been considered part of the education process for employees and for employers to understand better the potential within the workplace to identify these things, talk to employees, let employees know that if there is something that's going on with you, feel free to come and talk to us about it. And there'll be no discrimination. You can talk freely and we can support you, because that never happened before. And I think that was the big thing. That was a big mindset shift, if you like. And a lot of the work I do now is in that space because, as I've said many times, your best employee, your most productive employee in your business could be someone who is suffering the most, and you'd never know. You'd never know. And so, they are delivering every day and ticking off all the KPIs, and you would never suspect that they might have acute anxiety. You'd never suspect they're going through a real battle with depression, or they battle a mental health issue, whether it's bipolar, schizophrenia, which is really hard to manage in some cases, yet they can produce. So I think the important message there is for companies, for business, to know that with the right support and the right, knowing that the organisation is supportive, can take a heck of a lot of pressure off an individual. And when we talk about individuals, 20% of people in Australia, in fact it's 25% on average, will experience a mental health issue in their lifetime. So it's common, 1 in 4. It's 1 in 4. And obviously the severity can be different.
Yeah, sure.
But
it's
exactly, common. Yeah.
So that being the case where you're saying you might never know, like it's hard to see. What are some of the things you've seen work, and what are some of the stuff you educate on from this could be wider than business, but let's aim for business owners or employers, what they should be not necessarily looking out for, because you mightn't see the signs, but what you should be putting in place from a structure point of view to ensure that this is a sustainable approach to good mental health and effectively the results that are better performance or a better culture or whatever it may be.
Look, that's a good question. The signs, because it can be such a fluid thing and a changing scenario, you can have a situation where someone isn't in the grips of a mental health problem all the time. It can be periodic. So they may well be in a really good space, no anxiety, no depression, no acute stress for 6 months, for 12 months, for 2 years or longer, and then have an episode of depression or anxiety or acute stress. And that could be related to something that's external to the workplace. There's a lot of, there's family issues to deal with, there's money issues to deal with, relationship breakdowns to deal with. All of those things can be triggers for a type of mental stress and mental ill health. But once and then you have a situation where, okay, I'm through that rough period and the ship's back on an even keel and we continue on. Those things can certainly be an issue in the workplace. Things to look out for: people who are normally bubbly, outgoing, friendly, part of the team become withdrawn.
Yeah,
That's
sure.
always a big one. So they keep to themselves. They might not be interested in going to after work functions where they would normally be the first person that would go. Their work might be suffering. They might be behind deadlines. And you're wondering to yourself as the boss, you go, well, what's going on? What's going on with Louise? She's normally not in this workplace. I think in that sort of things, and you notice a difference. Either in behaviour, and it can be even behaviour that is more volatile towards the employer or to other employees, which is out of character. The things that are really out of character are big light bulb moments. You go, right, something's going on here. And I think the mistake that some organisations make is to straight away go down the disciplinary path and say that's unacceptable and, put them to one side and read the riot act to them, for want of a better phrase. Whereas my way of addressing something like that would be a very non-confrontational, one-on-one conversation and just saying, look, I've noticed these things. Is everything okay? is everything all right outside work? Is everything okay here? Are we asking too much of you? Is there, because we've noticed that you've been one of our model employees, but at the moment you're not, and we're here to support you. That's the first conversation, in my view, and quite often you'll get some answers. You'll wedge the door open, and then you might get the real reasons behind the situation. And I think that's a good place to start. And I think once the employee knows that the employer's got their back, then it takes an enormous amount of load off that employee, and then you're on the right track to, either advise, look, let's have a chat to a counsellor, let's have a chat to a psychologist, might need to talk to a psychiatrist. I've got a psychiatrist, known him for 20 years, he's been my psychiatrist since day one. So, because bipolar is an ongoing management illness, so that's, and he's fantastic, and I check in with him even when I'm feeling great, because he knows me and my mood almost as probably as well as I do.
But I think that's a key point, and you've labelled them by profession, but after 20 years, I'd say it's just a mate that's got your back, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, he's so obviously skilled in this area, but to me, that's something straight away that anyone could do, but also in business, is that making sure you've got those forums that are available to have a chat and regularly have a chat and making time. Often when we get busy, I think too many the things that sacrifice are the time with our people.
Yes, absolutely. And I think most workplaces these days, professional workplaces, I think particularly, although I've done some work in the mining industry too, and they're once a year things really. They have their training days once a year. That's it. But not to say they're not valuable. I think they're invaluable for employees and the same in business. What it shows the employee is that the management actually care. Great for morale. Once they know that you're investing in them, not just financially, but you're investing in them as people, then they go, well, these guys actually care about me as a person, and that makes a huge difference. I know it does for me personally. So the other thing that I think is really valuable, Andrew, is the toolbox talk, where you might have a meeting with the entire organisation, all the employees, and you talk in general terms, of course. You don't obviously betray confidences. You don't say, well, look, I had Melinda in here the other day and she's got some pretty ordinary issues. She's got some pretty serious health issues going on at the moment. Feel free to do what Melinda's done. You wouldn't do that because then everyone knows Melinda's story. But, and you just put out a general offering of, my door is open, I'm happy to talk. These, if we're talking mental health here, these things are common, and we're here to listen to you, and we'll support you in any way we can. So don't be afraid of knocking on the door. And have that message permeate through the workplace is, I think, a really valuable thing.
We spoke a bit about, if you've got a business and employees. What about we go a level above? A lot of viewers here would be small business owners. What have you seen, or how have you seen, or what works? What would be your advice to this sort of space for a business owner that might be a lone ranger? They might have a business partner, but it's that thing they don't really want to talk about, because it can be a very lonely place and a very stressful place, especially if you take the last couple of years we've been through off the back of COVID and lockdowns and stuff. What have you seen in that space?
Yeah, quite a bit too, and that's a really valuable point, because we do focus on the employees and then put the pressure, if you like, on the manager, the business owner. Say, well, you're now responsible not only for all of the other parts of the business, but the mental health and well-being of your employees. Who's looking after the business owner or the manager's mental health and well-being? And I think that is where that knowledge and having some tools yourself for your own mental health, knowing what the signs and symptoms are of poor mental health. It makes it, I think, you now know that, hey, I might have to do something. I might have to take some action here for myself and my own well-being. And my scenario, which we talked about previously, Andrew, was I had no idea what I was going through initially, other than I felt awful. I was stressed, and it didn't matter what I was doing day to day. I was barely functioning at all. It was, go home from work. I can't believe I worked through that period. And it was very much a case of presenteeism, not absenteeism. So I was at work, but I wasn't achieving much. And then home, exhausted after the day, and also putting on a face to say everything's good, everything's fine, when it wasn't. But you put on this face to the world, you don't want the world to see how you're actually going. And then it's like in the fetal position at home, exhausted.
Which also isn't good for then the flow-on effect to, they said, relationships or work or whatever it may be.
Absolutely.
Which is that self-fulfilling prophecy that it can take you down in an even darker place.
Exactly. So knowing that there is a road back, and that, if there's one message out of today's talk, is there's always a road back. Always a road back. I didn't think there was, because I thought things weren't going to change. But you've got to get that intervention, know the thing you're dealing with, and there are so many things you can do from a lifestyle point of view, from a medication point of view, just your own self-knowledge, getting to know yourself and what makes you tick and what your triggers are. I've been doing that for 20 years.
Well, and I think, for me, one of the things we work with our people, we work with clients, and you've reaffirmed it even from a different perspective today, is that even though it's a pretty dark experience, all experiences you can learn from. And you can sit there and go, well, how can I approach it differently with a bit of education or as you said, intervention? So, I think that the road back and what you talk about, that's probably the most impressive part. Well, not probably, it is, because, as you said, there'd be that many people that wouldn't come back or will live like this to see out their days. So, it is. And interesting, you keep talking about reaching out and talking. Just as we've been sitting here, we run quite a lot of coaching groups, if you like, but it's coaching on business, and people pay to be a part of it, etc. And it's just had me thinking. I think some of the stuff that we intend them to get out of it is the theory, but in reality, I think a lot of those people get a lot more mentally out of it, just to know that, hey, others are going through the same thing, or I can share and realise I'm not just alone here. And that's I digress, but that gives a bit of insight into the mindset of a business owner, I guess.
It gives a personal story, gives others permission to tell theirs. I think that's the big thing I've learned in the last 15 years. After some public speaking that I've done, I can remember one night in Narrabri, went to Narrabri to do a talk. And after the talk, I had a lady come up to me and she said, I wish my husband was here to see you talk. We lost him a year ago. He took his life. And she hadn't shared that with anyone. And the number of times I've heard stories, personal stories from people who've never spoken before. They've never told anybody about their own experiences. So there's a tremendous degree of trust put in me, I suppose, at that time to share that. But telling my story gives permission for them to tell theirs. And, it'll be things like, I've been through that. Father went through that. Mother went through that. Brother, sister, kids, workmates. You know exactly what you're talking about. And they may not have had that discussion with anyone else. So I can talk to you today and not have any emotional trigger through going through, which is pretty serious stuff, because I put that distance and grown through it, processed it, grieved where I needed to grieve many years ago. And the more, it's all been like therapy. I've done a lot. I haven't done a lot of talk therapy at all, really, with psychologists. It was never for me. Because I talk, I can do my own therapy in a way, but have the tools to do it. Share the story's been great. Reading about others' experiences, learning about the ins and outs of depressive illness and bipolar disorder, and just educating myself, really. That's been and that probably comes back to your question on business owners and managers, where it can be very lonely, right?
Yeah.
Very lonely at the top. So, they're the things. Get help, because there's always a road back if you're struggling.
But I think, as you said, it doesn't just happen. Where I think a lot of people, no matter what walk in life, if they've been through some suffering, especially this one where probably scared to come out about it, it just fixes itself. But as you've rightly pointed out, you're in a very good place, but it's taken work, taken effort.
It's taken a lot of work. Yeah. Look, I'm like everyone. I'm a work in progress, but it's liberating to get to a point where I am today, to be able to do what I do, and I'm present. That's, if you can get to that point where I don't review yesterday. I don't go to bed and toss and turn about yesterday. I do my best every day. I've dropped off the whole perfectionist thing. I was a perfectionist for a long time, and that's a one-way ticket to disappointment. So now I do my best, and that's good enough. And then I move on. And I'm absolutely present with you here today, and that's what we're having a chat. And when I go back to work, I probably won't give you a second thought. Don't take that personally.
No, mate, it just sounds like home life again. But that's so. I mean, it's great, and I think a couple of other things I wanted to cover. And what your advice would be. So we've spoken a lot about business owners, but what about young people? Because I think that for me, like anything, not too young, but the younger we can teach our future leaders or teach our future employees or whatever that may be on some of this stuff, maybe they don't have to go through some of the same struggles or that sort of thing. So what's your view on young people, and in particular, and social media pressures?
Good question. I think for schools, and there'll be a few teachers and a few principals in the education department that might go, oh no, not more work. I think some type of mental health awareness should be part of the curriculum. It's so big. It's so big for our teenagers, and the level of dysfunction that some of our kids experience through those teenage years when they're at school, those really important formative years at 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 as they're going through high school, heading into a HSC, which has got its own inherent pressures. We've got a situation right now where we've just come through the biggest life event that any of us will experience, which is COVID. Worldwide pandemic, lockdowns. This is a new ball game altogether on top of stresses that we already have in life. And our kids are going through it too. And the impact on that and the stresses around that, I don't honestly think, Andrew, we're going to see the results of that stress until for a few years yet. For a few years yet. So I think we need to have our eyes wide open on that and be on the front foot with that and be ahead of the game. Because it's critical. And these are the kids of the next generation in the workforce. They're going to be leaving high school, the HSC, many of them. Many are going to go to university, do extra study and go into business and go into teaching or wherever they go. And we want, and they want, the best possible result for themselves professionally, personally. So right here and now, we've got an issue to deal with, and I'm very confident that we can navigate through that. But to put our heads in the sand and say it's not happening and it's not a thing, and we can pick things up and continue on like nothing to see here, move on, I think is naive. extreme. As far as social media goes, that's a whole new ballgame too. You and I didn't grow up with social media. I use social media, part of my job, it's part of my work with the ABC, it's part of my speaking work. So I use all forms, well, not all forms, but I use LinkedIn for the business side of things, Facebook, I've got a mental health page on Facebook as well, and I use Instagram. So I use those things, but I'm conscious of when I use them and for how long. And I've got a cut-off point every night. So down tools, and that might be 6:30, and there's no more after 6:30 p.m. Because whatever we're winding our brains up and having these interactions with social media, you're actually impacting on your capacity to sleep well. And most of us don't realise that, but you put your head on the pillow, and if you're working on social media or active on social media till midnight, you may not be going into a deep sleep or good quality sleep until 2 or 3 in the morning, even though you might shut your eyes. Your brain subconsciously still working. So I'm conscious of that, but I think that's, without sounding like someone who's ancient on this, I still think we've got to be conscious of the amount of time that we spend on social media. Use it, great tool, and very effective for communicating. It's brilliant. It's brilliant for communicating with people and communicating messages. But as long as you're doing it consciously would be my answer.
Yeah. So have some hygiene rules around it, and you can be quite good. I think some of the things that we see these days, I heard a great saying, you've got your real life and your Insta life, and we probably need to remember that. And I guess that extends to technology generally too with your time factors. But
yes.
No, that's great. So, I mean, I'm conscious of time and that sort of stuff, but where's the future for you? I mean, I know you're doing a lot of motivational speaking, a lot of, mental health speaking. I mean, I'm assuming that continues and further spreading that message.
Absolutely. If I look forward, I'm saying I don't look too far forward because, all our lives are in a state of flux because things change. But I see a life post-ABC and post-broadcasting which expands further into that mental health space, because I said before, I want to be and choose to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And to be part of the solution, be as big as I can be in this space. And I don't say that in any ego way. There's no ego involved here. We've all got egos. I'm not sitting here saying to you, I'm a Zen master and I have no ego. I've got an ego. I've got a good ego. But the fact is I'm aware of that. That's, I think, one of the key things. Okay, sometimes you check yourself. You go, Craig, that's your ego, buddy. Pull your head in. But I got this idea. It's not an idea. It's a goal. It's a philosophy. I just want to be bigger in this space. And I think the more people in the space and the more messages in the space destigmatises the whole area and the whole space, if you like, of mental illness. My goal in life is by the time my mortal coil drifts off, is that mental health will be commonplace. It'll be spoken about in common terms. It will not have a stigma. It will not be different to any other health issue. And most people will go, I don't know why we were so slow on that. I'm picking that up.
Yeah, it's
and running with it. So that's where I'm at on that front.
I think you're absolutely right. And I've heard it said before, if you do an injury, you go get it seen too. If it's physical, yet if it's mental, it's not that forthcoming. And likewise, and on the contrary, if you want to get better at something, you practice. Yet we don't do it with mental health. So, mate, look, we could talk a lot longer, but I am conscious of time and what you've got going on. But, mate, I really do appreciate such a strong message being put and sharing your story, which, as you said before, I think, someone opening up helps others to open up. I guess from a business owner's point of view, we could summarise a fair few points there, but the main thing I think to take out of all that is, look for signs, make sure you're talking with your people, and for yourself even look after it. And if required, there's plenty of help out there, so seek it. But mate, I really do appreciate it. Great chat, and hopefully we'll get a follow up at some time in the not too distant future.
All right, look forward to it. Thank you.
Cheers, mate.
Good on you,
And,
Andrew.
till next episode. Cheers.